My fingers closed around the velvet box, and it was empty. Not lost. Not misplaced. Empty, the little indentation where the ring used to sit still holding its shape, like a mouth mid-sentence. I stood in my mother's closet at 6:47 in the morning, sunlight cutting through the blinds in thin white blades, and I heard her voice from the kitchen, low, almost giddy, talking to someone on the phone. She'll never even notice it's gone. I closed the box. I put it back exactly where I found it. And I smiled, not because it didn't hurt, because I already knew what I was going to do about it. My name is Dana Whitfield. I'm 34 years old and I own a small accounting firm in Columbus, Ohio, 11 employees, a client roster I built from nothing over 9 years, starting with a card table in my apartment and a laptop I bought on a payment plan. I tell you that because it matters. Because the woman you're about to meet is precise, methodical, the kind of person who reconciles a ledger down to the penny and still misses the biggest number of all, the emotional debt her own family had been running up against her for years. The ring in question belonged to my grandfather, Walter Whitfield. A plain gold band with a single garnet stone, appraised at $4,200, but worth infinitely more than that. It was the ring he'd worn for 51 years of marriage, the ring my grandmother pressed into my palm 3 weeks before she died, saying, "This goes to you, Dana. You're the one who'll keep it safe." My mother, Carol, had been holding on to it for safekeeping in her closet for 2 years, while I saved up to get it resized and insured properly. My younger sister, Brooke, 27, had just booked a $6,800 girls' trip to Cancun flights, an all-inclusive resort, a swim-up bar package, 3 weeks after losing her third job in 2 years for what she called personality conflicts with management. I didn't know yet that those two facts were connected. I was about to find out. It was a Sunday dinner. My mother's dining room, the good tablecloth out, a roast chicken steaming in the center of the table like nothing was wrong. Brooke walked in wearing a new sundress, sunglasses pushed up into freshly highlighted hair, a mimosa already sweating in her hand at 4 in the afternoon. "Guess who's getting bronzed in 2 weeks?" she sang, spinning once in the doorway like she was already on a beach. I smiled and asked how she'd swung it, since she'd told me a month earlier she was between opportunities, and asked to borrow $200 for her electric bill. She waved a hand. "Mom helped out. Family takes care of family, right?" My mother didn't look up from the chicken. She just said, "Pass the potatoes, Dana," in the exact tone she used when she wanted a subject closed. I passed the potatoes. I smiled. And underneath the table I quietly opened the notes app on my phone and typed, "Ask about the trip. Ask about the money. Ask where helped out comes from." That night I went to check on the ring, just to look at it the way I did sometimes sitting on my mother's bed while she watched TV in the other room. The box was empty. I didn't confront anyone. Not yet. Confrontation without proof is just an argument, and arguments are exactly what let guilty people control the story. Instead, I drove to every pawn shop and jewelry buyer within 15 miles of my mother's house, one by one, showing a photo of the ring I'd taken years earlier at Christmas. The fourth shop, a place called Redline Gold and Loan, had it. The owner, a tired man named Frank, pulled up the transaction on his computer without much hesitation once I explained I was family, and just wanted to understand the paperwork. Sold 3 weeks earlier. Seller, Carol Whitfield. Amount, $2,900, less than the appraisal because pawn shops always undercut, but $2,900 was still a very specific, very familiar number. It was almost exactly the cost of Brooke's flights and resort deposit. I asked my mother directly, gently over coffee, "Mom, where's Grandpa's ring? I wanted to bring it to get insured." She didn't even flinch. "Oh, I moved it to the safety deposit box at the bank. Liability issue. Our homeowner's policy doesn't cover unlisted jewelry over a certain value, and I didn't want it sitting in a closet anymore. I'll get you the paperwork." Jargon. Confidence. A completely fabricated insurance policy detail delivered with the ease of someone who'd rehearsed it in the shower. I said, "Oh, that makes sense. Thank you for being careful with it." I believed nothing. I was buying time. 2 days later, I forgot my phone charger at my mother's house and let myself in with my key instead of knocking. I heard her in the kitchen laughing, phone on speaker, talking to my Aunt Denise. She actually bought the safety deposit box thing. My mother was saying, delighted. Dana will believe anything if you say it calmly enough. That girl trusts numbers more than people. It's honestly kind of sad. Denise laughed. And Brooke got her trip? Brooke got her trip, my mother said. Walter would have wanted his granddaughters happy, not sitting on some dusty ring collecting dust in a box. I stood in the hallway, keys still in my hand, and let that sentence sink all the way down. Here's where it stopped being about a ring. I pulled my mother's mail for 2 weeks, not stealing it, just watching what arrived, because she still had me as a secondary contact on a few shared accounts from when I'd helped her refinance her house years earlier. A letter arrived from a debt consolidation company. Then a second notice marked final warning from a credit card with a $14,300 balance. The ring wasn't an isolated betrayal. It was a symptom. My mother had been quietly bleeding money for over a year, co-signing for Brooke's failed boutique, covering 3 months of Brooke's rent, and now liquidating a dead man's wedding ring to fund a beach vacation while drowning in debt she'd never mentioned to me once, despite the fact that I was the one in the family who did this professionally for free every single year at tax season. The final beat came at my mother's birthday, 2 weeks before the Cancun trip. I brought a card and a small gift. Brooke was there, tipsy on champagne, showing off a new bikini she'd bought for the trip. At one point, thinking I'd stepped out to the bathroom, I heard Brooke through the thin hallway wall, talking to her boyfriend on video chat. "Dana's so easy to play," she said, giggling. "She's the responsible one, so nobody ever checks on her. She just pays for everything and says thank you when we let her come to dinner." I stood in that hallway with my hand flat against the wall, and for the first time, I let myself feel exactly how much that cost me. Then I walked back in, smiled, and asked if anyone wanted more cake. Here's what I decided standing in that hallway. If they thought I was easy, I would become easier. I started slouching a little when I sat at family dinners. I let my voice go soft and slightly uncertain, the way it used to sound in college before I'd built anything. I started saying things like, "Oh, I don't really understand all that legal stuff," even though understanding all that legal stuff was quite literally my entire career. I brought a small spiral notebook to the next dinner, the kind with a cartoon cat on the cover, the kind that says harmless, and I absent-mindedly left it on the table while I helped clear dishes, blank pages showing so anyone glancing over would see nothing worth hiding from. Inside my blazer pocket, a different kind of notebook was recording everything. I told myself, let them believe the version of you that's easy to fool. People don't lie carefully to someone they think is already beaten. They get sloppy. They get loud. And loud people leave evidence. I started asking my mother confused questions about the safety deposit box. Which bank was that again? I might want to add something to it too. And watched her stumble over an answer that changed twice in one conversation. I was building a stage. I just needed one more prop. The prop was a gift. 3 weeks before Christmas, I told my mother and Brooke in front of each other that I'd come into a small work bonus, $6,000, and I wanted to split it between them for the holidays, since family should take care of family. It wasn't a bonus. It was bait. I told them the money would be transferred after the new year, pending some paperwork on my end, and I said it in exactly the soft, slightly too trusting voice I'd been practicing for a month. Then I did 2 things. First, I set up a small voice recorder, the kind used for lecture notes, inside a decorative tissue box I gifted to my mother's living room, angled toward her favorite armchair, the one she always sat in when she was on the phone. Second, I told Brooke privately in a text I knew she'd screenshot and forward to her boyfriend just to gossip, "Don't tell Mom yet, but I might actually propose the ring gets replaced with the $6,000 as a kind of family trust fund thing." I know it's silly, but it felt important. I sat back and waited. 3 days later, my phone buzzed under the dinner table at my own apartment, an alert from the recorder app syncing a new file. I didn't check it there. I waited until I was alone, hands steady, coffee going cold beside me, and I pressed play. My mother's voice, unmistakable, talking to Brooke on speakerphone. "If she wants to talk about a trust fund, we just agree to it and figure out the details later." Once the money's in an account, it's a lot harder for her to take it back. We'll deal with the ring thing if it ever comes up. Worst case, I say I lost the paperwork from the bank. Brooke, laughing. You're diabolical, Mom. I'm resourceful, my mother said. There's a difference. I sat in my kitchen at 11 at night and listened to that twice. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop, titled it Family Dinner, December 14th, and saved the file. The trap was set. Now I needed the room. I chose Christmas dinner. 12 people: my mother, Brooke, Aunt Denise, my Uncle Rob, cousins, my mother's longtime boyfriend Gary, and me. The good china. The tablecloth with the little embroidered holly leaves my grandmother had stitched by hand decades earlier. The same grandmother whose husband's ring was sitting in some stranger's display case with a price tag on it. Halfway through dinner, my mother stood up with a wine glass in hand, ready to make her usual toast, and Brooke leaned over to me, just loud enough for the table to hear, sundress tan still on her from Cancun. So did the trust fund thing happen? I could really use it. This next trip to Tulum isn't gonna pay for itself. She laughed, and a few cousins laughed with her, not unkindly, just not knowing. My mother raised her glass. To family, and to the people in it who understand what really matters. I stood up too. I didn't raise my voice. I never do. Before we toast, I said, I want to talk about Grandpa's ring. The table went quiet in that specific way a room goes quiet when it senses something is about to break. Mom told me 2 months ago it was in a safety deposit box at the bank, for insurance reasons. I kept my tone level almost gentle. I actually called the bank last week. There is no safety deposit box under her name. There never has been. My mother's smile didn't move, but her knuckles went white around the stem of her wine glass. I have a receipt, I continued, from Redline Gold and Loan, dated 3 months ago, for the sale of a gold ring with a garnet stone, sold by Carol Whitfield, for $2,900, almost exactly the cost of Brooke's flights and resort deposit for a trip that happened 2 weeks later. Dana, this is not the time, my mother started. I also have a recording, I said, and I set my phone gently on the table screen up, of a conversation from December 14th, where you discussed accepting a $6,000 holiday gift from me under false pretenses, with a plan to claim you'd lost the paperwork if I ever asked about the ring again. Silence. Real silence. Aunt Denise's fork frozen halfway to her mouth. There is no work bonus, I said quietly. There was never going to be $6,000. I wanted to see what you'd do with money you thought was already yours. Brooke's face had gone pale under her fading tan. Dana, you recorded us? That's insane. That's actually illegal. Ohio is a one-party consent state, I said, calm as ever. I looked it up. It's completely legal for me to record a conversation I'm a participant in, or that occurs in a room I own, or with the consent of anyone present. Gary, would you like to confirm you knew about the recorder? Gary, my mother's boyfriend, looked at his plate and said nothing, which was answer enough. He'd known. He'd let it happen. I picked up the little tissue box from the sideboard, the one that had sat in my mother's living room for 3 weeks, quietly listening, and I set it on the table between the mashed potatoes and the ham. Then calmly, I picked up the empty velvet ring box I'd carried in my coat pocket all evening, the one that used to hold my grandfather's ring, and I closed it, slow and deliberate, the small click of the hinge the loudest sound in the room. I called the police non-emergency line an hour before dinner, I said. Not to press charges tonight. I wanted this said out loud in front of everyone first. But theft of an inherited item with a documented appraisal is a felony in this state above $2,500. I have a decision to make about whether I file that report. I haven't made it yet. 2 things happened almost at once. A knock came at the front door. Aunt Denise, closest to it, opened it to find a uniformed officer, there for what I'd arranged as a wellness check adjacent civil matter consultation. I'd scheduled in advance, specifically timed, specifically calm, no drama, no cuffs, just presence. Just wait. Just the unmistakable feeling in the room that consequences were no longer theoretical. My mother didn't cry. She looked, for the first time in my whole life, genuinely afraid of me. Dana, she said, quiet now, all the confidence drained out. It's just a ring. No, I said. It was never just a ring. It was a test. And you failed it in front of 12 witnesses. I sat back down. I ate the rest of my dinner in silence and nobody stopped me. In the 6 weeks that followed, the consequences arrived the way consequences do when you've documented everything carefully, quiet, procedural, and total. My mother was formally charged with theft of an item over $2,500, a fourth-degree felony under Ohio law. Facing the recording, the pawn receipt, and Frank's cooperative statement, she accepted a plea deal. Restitution of $4,200, the full appraised value, paid to me directly, plus 100 hours of community service and 2 years of probation. Brooke, despite insisting she didn't know anything, was named in a civil small claims filing I brought separately over the $6,800 trip funded by stolen property, a filing she settled out of court for $3,200 rather than risk a judgment on record, 3 months before she applied, unsuccessfully, for a retail management position that would have required a background check. Aunt Denise, who had laughed along on that recorded phone call, found herself quietly uninvited from every family gathering I hosted going forward. No drama, no announcement, just an absence that spoke for itself. Gary, the boyfriend who'd known and said nothing, left my mother 4 months later. Word through the family grapevine was that watching someone commit a felony over dinner plans had been a lot to process about who she really was. But I want to be clear about something. I didn't burn the whole family down. My cousin Melissa, 22, had nothing to do with any of it. She'd been away at school the entire time. And when she reached out afterward, shaken and uncertain where she stood, I told her the truth plainly. This was never about her, and my door stayed open for her the way it always had. I helped her fill out a scholarship application 2 weeks later, the same way I'd have done before any of this happened. Frank, the pawn shop owner, got his name kept out of anything public. He'd done nothing wrong, just his job, and he'd helped me without hesitation. I sent him a card. And the ring itself, Frank had never resold it, some quiet mercy of small shop inventory turnover. I bought it back for $3,100, more than my mother had sold it for, and I had it resized that same month the way I'd always meant to. 8 months later, on a cold, wet March night, my doorbell rang at 9:40 p.m. It was my mother, standing under my porch light with rain flattening her hair. No umbrella, a cardboard box of what looked like the last of her furniture in the trunk of a car idling at the curb. Denise's car, I noted, driving her because apparently that relationship had survived after all. Dana, she said, voice cracking, I lost the house. I have nowhere to go. Please. I'm your mother. I stood in the doorway in the warm light, my husband Marcus a few steps behind me in the hallway, not speaking, just present, the way he'd been present through every single step of this, the one person who never once told me I was being too harsh, too cold, too much. I looked at my mother for a long moment, rain running down her collar, the garnet ring on my own hand, catching the porch light. I hope you find somewhere warm tonight, I said. It won't be here. And I closed the door. Not slammed, just closed, quiet and final, the same quiet I'd used through every confrontation that got me here. Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. You okay? I will be, I said, and for the first time in over a year I actually believed it. We turned off the porch light together and went back to the kitchen, where the coffee was still warm. Here's what I learned. The people who count on you to be too kind to check the receipts are the same people who will spend your trust like it's their own money. Being the easy one in a family isn't a compliment. It's a role someone assigns you because it benefits them. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't yell. It's stay quiet, gather the truth, and let the truth do the yelling for you. Have you ever had to play weak to catch someone who underestimated you? Tell me in the comments, I read every single one. If this story hit home, hit like, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.